Hi, and welcome to the Angels, Magic and Joy podcast. We're your hosts, Kirsty Jandra and Kate Rajba, here to sprinkle a little inspiration, guidance, and magic into your day. Join us as we explore the spiritual journeys of our guests and share stories that uplift and inspire. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Angels, Magic and Joy podcast. Today with fabulous Jacquie. And Jacquie, I was thinking, introducing you, and I could go on. I was kind of thinking I could go on, about you being a herbalist, all your poetry, all your healing work, all your, therapy, everything that you do. And then thinking of it, I was like, I was still missing something. That's not my Jacquie, right? That's not my beloved Jacquie. And what word came to me, and again, I'm gonna try to translate. So in Polish, when you say a witch, if you translate it directly, is the woman that has the knowing, is the one that knows. It's just you meet someone and you get that sense that that person has that knowing. And of course, apart from your years and years of experience and your knowledge and your wisdom, but since I met you, I always got that sense that you have that knowing. It's like we could sit and I feel like I don't have to explain to you, that it's like you would know. And I wanted to ask you, what's your view on that? First of all, were you born with the knowing? Is it something you've learned? Okay. Is it something you inherit? Where did you get it? And how can does everyone have the knowing? And what's the and a bit touching about the discernment, and how do we also discern, is it the voice of our heart or is it our ego, touching a bit on that.
Okay, thank you, Kate. I don't know what to say. I feel immensely flattered, but also, I suppose one of the things about if you know anything at all is that you know nothing, and so that it's really not. And I'm not being sort of falsely, I hope, falsely modest. I just think that that you said years and years, which makes me feel as old as God, which is true actually, but nevertheless, it's kind of the older I get, the awareness of the less I know, in a way, but also the trust in the knowing of my heart. And so it's you sort of acquire some skills, you acquire a few. You're always learning, but you acquire a little bit of awareness, a bit more, perhaps a little bit more sometimes in certain areas, because you love them, with the herbs and, well, with all the things that I do, I suppose do be, it comes from the heart. It's love, and love directs me, and therefore you want to know more. You want to get to know in terms of the herbs and the trees and everything. You want to meet them in some sort of authenticity as much as you can. So it's well, certainly as a herbalist, and if you're doing anything where you're interacting in a therapeutic way with other people, you need to be responsible and obviously do book learning stuff, but really my main teachers in terms of herbs particularly would be the herbs themselves, the plants themselves. They're so wise, and they're so generous, and they're unbelievably generous when you think how we treat nature generally, from a human perspective. It's incredible that they remain so generous and giving and loving and wise. It's very humbling. when you meet the plants in that way, and you realize that they just keep on giving, despite, I think it feels like it's an apt. Well, I don't know that we're so tuned into consciousness. It's a different sort of consciousness, perhaps. But I feel as if it was just something that was, despite everything that we do to abuse and hurt a lot of nature, they just keep giving, because it's and that's the teaching in that, for me, is that that's what we do. That whatever the situation, you just keep on loving, because anything less than that, it's not worth it, really, is it? It's like, why would you not keep on giving your all, even under the most, it seems to me that that's what these times are about. I must have been mad when I agreed to come in at this time, because I know I did, probably, but I must have been, I have this idea that I was sitting there with whoever it is that helps you decide what's what, some beautiful, helpful angel, and I think we must have been partying, and I must have had a hangover or something, and I was caught unawares, and I said, "Oh yeah, great, fine," and here we are in a really difficult time. I'm sure everybody thinks that about every time, every age, being human. It is, but it does seem to be a challenging time, and it challenges us. You talked about authenticity and about ego, and how do we discern, where we're coming from, and that's really difficult. I think it's really difficult. I think we test, or at least I try to test things and talk about it, and we talk about it, quite glibly, testing things on the heart. But I suppose, how do we discern whether, I mean, ego's involved in most things, to be absolutely honest with you, I think. But how do we discern whether it's coming from ego? Well, possibly is by asking ourselves, what's in it for me? What would be, how do I, in this action, or in this situation, in deciding, or speaking in this way, or doing something, how do I benefit? If this happened in a situation where nobody was aware, there was nobody witnessing this, there was nobody going to directly feed back to me, or, I mean, I don't think this hacks it completely, but it might help to just feel that, the only person witnessing this is myself. And my and I suppose too is to, if it is about the way we're relating, or some action that we're taking, to recognize that the other is ourselves. There's no separation in the end. There's no hierarchy of being. I mean, we're no less, but we're no more than any other being. And and I suppose you can test it in that way by saying, how would it feel if I was on the receiving end of this? That's another way of looking at things. It depends what the situation is, doesn't it? I mean, what were you thinking, Kate, when you came up with that thought about ego and discernment? Where you're coming from. What were you thinking about in that?
I was kind of thinking, very, very often is that confusion when we to make any decisions, really. even let's take, because it's good to talk about facts and informations and situations. So let's say it's often that situation, when someone was completely no boundaries or whatsoever. Let's say a woman that's never experienced boundaries in her life of whatsoever, and then she starts gaining her power back. We often go into the other spectrum, and that's towards any situation. So often if we had, let's say, no power, we're kind of seeking the too much, so in order to find the balance, right? So often when you go to the other extreme, it's hard to find out the decisions I make. Let's say, okay, now I'm setting the boundaries, now I'm being really, 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 is it actually from the heart, or is it again conditioning, trying to find that balance, right? So very often, in context, let's say, of relationships, we would react or respond not really from the heart, but again, it's a conditioning that's driving us to go to the other spectrum. And it's like it's constantly feeling torn. Is it actually okay? On one hand, I feel like, okay, being all sweet and nice and soft and fluffy, but on the other hand, no, I don't want anyone to cross my boundaries, right? So it's like constant, kind of that discernment. Is it from my heart? Is it the ego? Is it the conditioning? So how to
all
find
of it.
that balance.
I mean, it's in truth,
the right way.
all of it, and that's the journey, isn't it, for us to find out. And
that's
also,
why I'm asking you, Jackie. I just want the answer.
oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah, I should have sorted that beforehand, shouldn't I? But no, I suppose. What do I suppose about that? Yeah, that well, first of all, you need ego. You can't, we can't function without some form of self-awareness that is going to have. There's going to be an ego side of that, and also, being soft and fluffy and everything can also be an ego. It can be, oh, here I am being, a marvelous manifestation of the divine feminine, I'm being soft and fluffy. Well, not that I believe that that's what the divine feminine is, but, that would be a nice egoic way of, when we how do we stop being self-conscious? With great difficulty, I think, because that's an idea of yourself. Do you see what I mean? So when you set boundaries, which is a really good idea, and I'm still learning about that, but when you set boundaries, it's interesting. We're very judgmental about ourselves. We're very, very quick to, because I did, speaking for myself, I was reared to be a pleasing girl, who didn't, who essentially looked after other people and kind of had to put other people's needs first and was supposed to be pleasing, basically. So that the idea of boundaries, there's an inner voice that goes, oh, this isn't, maybe this is a bit heavy, I'm saying no an awful lot, or I'm being very, very kind of, feels fierce when you're used to being a particular way and being compliant in a way. And the way I was reared, and I'm a lot older than you, but the way I was reared was that was the sort of way the feminine should be, and actually it's inauthentic, of course, because it's presumably too, it's very, I'm going to again only speak for myself, but I think there's an inherited kind of behavior there. There's, it came from tradition and wounding through the mother line and so on, and well, and my grandmothers on both sides, and my mother, and going way back, and you can kind of feel that that obviously influences the way that we're reared. And so I think, just to come back to the boundaries thing, I don't think it's necessarily that you're being, heavy in ego, but in fact rather the reverse, maybe, because it's actually an attempt to honor yourself and to be more authentic. And when we meet in relationship in a way that is not wearing a mask, not being pleasing in the sort of in the kind of acting sense, then really we do more honor to the other by being authentic, by being ourselves, and by saying, and it's vulnerable feeling, I think, when when you whatever your particular way of that feels comfortable to you, I suppose, behaviors, even if they're not really very comfortable, but you're used to responding in particular ways. It can feel very strange to and challenging and vulnerable to set boundaries, to say, actually this isn't okay, or actually I don't really like that, or I would prefer us to talk about this, or whatever it is. That takes quite a lot of courage if you're used to being compliant or taking care of the other person's feelings. And that's that can also be being empathetic and sensitive and so on. But if you're over empathetic in the sense that you put yourself very much last in that, and you're so eagerly reading how the other person is, and then trying to take care of that, make them feel comfortable, ease whatever the issue is, you're not putting yourself in the picture, and that's doing them and yourself a huge disservice. So I'm not sure about the whole ego thing, where that sits there, but I'm not sure that I think authenticity is really, really important, and it's a journey. I mean, there's layers and layers of ourselves, isn't there? And we take one mask off and then realize that there's still a bit of another one there, or there's still armoring, or there's still and also perhaps the discernment thing that you talked about is that you don't necessarily strip off all your armor for everybody. Maybe you don't. What is the I mean, the awareness of, am I being authentic? I think if there's or am I don't know, there's nuances here. It's that discernment of how much that's another boundary. How much do I wish to share here? And I think the older I get, the more reckless I am about sharing. I think I'm a bit bonkers in that area, because I kind of think, oh, I can't be bothered to worry about that anymore. Do you know what I mean? So you get to I think that's one of the benefits of getting older, is that you don't really care so much about how you're perceived, and you can be, as you say, you can be witchy and eccentric, and it's sort of, that's a bit of ego too, I tell you. Oh, I quite like being called eccentric and witchy, but it's a whole interesting, these are nuances. This is what we're teasing out all the time, isn't it? But testing on our hearts is probably the way, and doing no harm, and kindness is possibly the very greatest attribute that is most important. Loving kindness. That's what the Dalai Lama calls it, and it seems to me that's it really. But loving kindness to yourself as well, Kate. You can't. It's not just something that you're pouring out of yourself. You're pouring it in as well. It's kind of, there's no separation. There's no difference really in the end, and yet the difference is what makes it all so interesting. So it's wonderful, isn't it? Paradox. We're all unique, and at the same time we're all one. Amazing. And how do we appreciate that? What it is to be human? Yeah. I mean, I was talking to my friend Eileen about this the other day, and she was saying that she'd been listening to a podcast or something. Somebody, I probably got this wrong where she got it from, but she was talking about somebody talking about coming into incarnation, being born basically, and how that's the most difficult thing for our spirits, our souls, to come into the limitation of the body, because it's like being squeezed into a tight little sausage skin, having been, absolutely wonderfully expansive and free and in this sort of wonderful sea of bliss, to in terms of your awareness of being, and then suddenly to be squeezed into this very, very tight space, so it's a challenging place to be, and that's presumed, and I believe that it's supposed to be the toughest school, in the cosmos, kind of thing. It's only it's not for the faint-hearted that you choose Earth as your place to go. But I'm sure we've done it loads of times. But it's yeah. At least what we're talking about is what we're here to learn, isn't it? Really, this kind of dance. It's a dance. I take life too seriously. I think I do, on the whole, and I think that's what I want to learn about, lightening up, and just seeing, because that brings the energy up. That's the best way to bring the energy up, is to laugh and to lighten things up, and to to really connect with the lightness of being. I channeled a book years and years ago called The Way of Laughing, and it's all about that. It's all about, it's a completely different perspective. It's not very, I don't know, maybe it's part of me, I don't know, I really don't know. But it certainly doesn't sound like me, and I mean, I wasn't conscious completely when I was channeling it, but maybe it is, because we don't know who we are anyway, do we? Really, we're so much more than what we experience in this life. I think we see about a micro amount of the reality. But anyway, in Way of Laughing, it was a perspective that was constantly flipping everything to a very light way of seeing that we take ourselves far too seriously, and we have all sorts of judgments about things that are completely bonkers when you look at them. Like, it's like comparing, how can you compare yourself to somebody else, or see somebody else as better or worse than you, or more able or whatever, because they are you. They're just purely a reflection of you. So the comparison is sort of mad, really. Yeah. When you allow that, it's why I suppose the things that are happening in the world at the moment are so importantly challenging, because there's so much fear and separation going on, and division and everything, and that's just an illusion. It's such a powerful illusion. It's just not true. It's so, but there's so much about sort of organized society that is like that. So all these things are challenges to how we respond, and I fail all the time. fail to kind of
I would like to dive
step
in
up.
more into that, what's actually happening, because
Sorry.
I would like to dive in what you're talking about, Jackie. You know what's actually happening this year?
What is happening in the world?
Kirsty,
Well,
Kirsty
I
wanted,
mean,
yeah.
I don't. What do I know about that? I don't know. I'm sure that
Well,
we're all
Kirsty
wondering.
asked the question. Kirsty's trying to ask you a
I
question.
was just wanting to let you flow, Jackie, but I really feel like I want to jump in because you've
But she's
picked up
trying to
on
jump in. I see that.
so beautifully on so many points that are so relevant to exactly that, exactly where we are today. The essentially passing everything that we do through the heart and trying to, as much as we can, release judgment of self so that we release judgment of others, and that oneness and that reciprocity of energy, and the squeezing our souls into the bodies and all of that, and the madness we must have gone through when we decided to come down and making that decision. So all of that you've explained so beautifully and poetically, just wanting to sort of try and sort of condense that into where we are now. And you've just touched upon it so beautifully, where you talked also into the karmic inheritance of especially the maternal line that we're here, I feel, to completely break in this incarnation. And I wonder how you feel. Do you feel globally that we're now starting a fresh take on what karma is? Are we we're just finishing the year of the snake? Are we shedding? Are we finally shedding all these patterns of behavior, of thought, of action, of carrying through the DNA patterning to break as we purify collectively and individually, of course, which has been so hard for all of us? Do you feel that we're starting in a fresh cycle there? And also, this is a massive question to ask, so forgive us, but we're here to dive deep. What do you think the overarching energy is, Jackie, of this year? I mean, just kind of an overarching feel for all of that, please, because you just started to touch on it, and I feel that you've got so much to share with us.
Well, the answer is I don't know. But not really. I mean, I can certainly muse along with you about things. I know that there are a lot of very sound teachers who are talking about, the whole wheel of karma changing now, so that, I suppose I'm a very poor tarot person, but if you look at the Wheel of Fortune, and it seems to me that we are in a huge cycle of change, and it's massive, and I think that and again, I'm a very poor astrologer as well, but of what I know about a little bit about that, and the people who I truly admire there are saying, is that we have extraordinary alignments, cosmic alignments at this time. So it feels as if this is on a scale that is unprecedented, really. And so maybe I don't know about karma. Does karma suddenly end? I don't know. Karma's sort of simple and complicated, isn't it? Because it's it really is a sort of action and reaction, energetic thing. And we experience that personally, and it obviously happens collectively. And we've got world karma, and then you look at national karma, and you look at and we can't separate ourselves out from any of that. And I'm a great believer in well, not, I suppose we can't oppress ourselves to the point, but responsibility seems to me to be a very, very important part of, if it, I think we've explored in some, well, certainly in my lifetime, a little bit, because I was only a child, but, you think of sort of well, I was aware of the sort of late hippie movement of freedom, which was coming at a time when there were a lot of unfreedoms. There were, you had drafting in the States and Vietnam War and all sorts of things, so that there was a sort of reaction to that, and a whole lot of beautiful energy around freedom. And again, thinking about the feminine and sexuality and all of those things, it was really, really important changes. But if we're truly to experience that, rather than it just flipping over, which is what seems to keep happening, is that, you then get this sort of incredibly oppressive, and certainly in the world, I mean, I'm just talking about, tiny bit of the world, because you're talking about the Western world and a particular part of the Western world, there's but as far as, as women's freedoms are concerned, they're not in many parts of the world. There's no autonomy or freedom. Somebody said, must have been on social, I probably was on Instagram or something today, but was saying about, that that in Iran, that women can't sing in the garden. They're not allowed. The birds can sing in the garden. It's they have less rights, if you like, than the birds. God knows the birds are struggling for life as well. But we're living in so the flip of that is this oppression, and so all, without getting utterly depressed and kind of miserable about it, the only thing we can do is work with ourselves, actually, in the end. Because if we do believe that there's no separation, we can hopefully, by taking some responsibility and doing it in as light-hearted and as kind and as playful and as hopeful and loving way as we can with ourselves, we must change the whole notion of karma. So because we start to flip the reality, don't we? If we do this work ourselves, we can't force anybody else to do it, and we can make ourselves very, very unhappy trying to, but I think we can effect massive change if we do the work ourselves, because we're part of it. So, we've got more power than we think we have, probably, a lot. It always is mildly frustrating when horrible things are happening in the world, and you think, there's a deliberate suppression of people's awareness of how powerful they are. It's a completely, it's a well orchestrated campaign to keep people small, to keep them feeling, unable to affect any change. But of course, we can instantly, I think. So in that respect, sorry, your question about karma, I don't know the answer to it, actually, but it seems to me that everything's speeding up at the most incredible rate in terms of how we experience things. So, we know in theory, but we don't experience it, well, mostly, is we know that we're popping in and out of reality at, however many milliseconds it is, yeah, now I'm here and now I'm not, kind of thing, in terms of our kind of material, physical being. But we don't experience it like that. I experience myself as extremely solid. But in point of fact, we're just, constantly popping in and out of manifestation. but it's so happening so fast. But it seems to me that we are experiencing things very, very fast now compared to, at any other time that I've ever, and it seems to be on a, speeding up at a huge rate. And I think we can affect change instantly the moment we truly decide to. That it's the deciding, that's the problem. We're back to the old ego. It's all joined up, this all these things we're talking about, because it's really, really hard, isn't it? I mean, if we truly allowed that truth, then we know that, I don't know, I can't remember how long it is now. Is it 7 months or something it takes to regenerate your liver, something like that? But I mean, people with wonky livers would regenerate a perfect liver. Why wouldn't they? But we don't, because we're fixed in a particular way of thinking and a particular way of believing about things. So we believe about that. We have stories we tell ourselves about reality, and certainly about our own reality. And so we keep on replicating whatever the distortions are, or the difficulties, or the which presumably were a part of our learning process and part of what it is to be human. But nevertheless, we do actually have the power to change that if we allow it, but it's really, really hard, isn't it? Really hard work to stay conscious enough of that magic.
What's the difference, Jackie? It's always that question. On one hand, we all know what's happening globally, geopolitically, and on one hand it's important to be aware of what's happening, but on the other hand, what you're saying, we want to, we don't want to feed which wolf do you feed, right?
Sorry, say that again. I didn't get that bit.
So when we know what's happening in the world, is always that part of, on one hand, it's important to know what's happening, it's important to share the information, right? But on the other hand, is which energies do you feed? Because when you're going into, so where is the balance? What's the solution in that? Because on one hand, it's important people are informed, we are informed, that there is a discussion, instead of, and then you have the other spectrum, which is, oh no, everything is love and light, it's all perfect because we are all one, it's all beautiful, but it's not practical. Like when I wake up every morning, if I'm just staying all love and light, my kids won't be fed. Do you know what I'm saying? It's
well,
like,
yes.
What's the solution to that?
Well, I don't.
On one hand, come on, Jackie. I need answers here. Pronto. I need answers.
It's hilarious. I love it.
Because on one hand, how do you stay aware, know what's going on, and kind of support it without feeding it? Without feeding the system. And teaching the technology as well. We had that conversation that the monster is growing and learning, right? So how do you kind of do your mission, be aware, but without feeding it? Is it even possible?
I don't know, Lovey. I think, it still comes back to I think it still comes back to working on ourselves, because what we're talking about really is the shadow side of the world, what's happening in the world, and all the sweetness and light, hello birds, hello bees, hello flowers, hello trees, all that lovely sweetness and light, which is the world I like to live in. But nevertheless, it's we have to own our own shadows. And it seems to me that the world at the moment is crazily working out all the shadows that we've lived in, obviously different societies in different parts of the world, but there's been so much suppression, so much disallowal of different aspects of what it is to be human, that everybody's experienced that personally in different ways. Those suppressions of different behaviors that we have, society's told us unacceptable, or feelings, or whatever it is, And as women, we know loads about, you know, all the things that we're supposed to be and not be, or express and not express, and, you know, and all of those things. But that is then manifested in the collective. Of course it is. You know, that is creating. I mean, it's a sort of feedback loop, isn't it? So you have human beings creating social structures. I mean, we talked about the whole conspiracy theory stuff, and I'm big into all that. But we'll maybe get there. But you know, essentially, you have human beings who create social structures in order to, and you know, we've had a horrible time with sort of patriarchal social structures that have been all about control, really. And mostly it's about trying to, you know, trying to control, well, in patriarchy, it's about trying to control maybe feminine power. You know, power is a whole, you know, huge thing. And I mean, there's been some really good books written about all of that. There's a wonderful book called The Chalice and the Blade, and I can't remember the name of the author. But anyway, it's essentially about, I'm diverting myself here, but anyway, it's about thinking about the feminine and thinking about patriarchy and the suppression of the feminine. But she writes about the fact that, you know, when we were hunter-gatherers and we lived in communities that were kind of flowing really with nature, and had to be totally cooperative and you know, very kind of interconnected communities, where ownership per se was not an issue, because you moved on and you lived in a kind of harmonious, you know, this is possibly me being very Arcadian, but nevertheless, you know, you lived in this kind of harmony with nature and each other, and that included relationships which involve care of children and care of each other and feeding each other and looking after each other. But essentially, the women had the magic of producing the children, and the fathering of the children would have been less of an issue, I think, in a society where you didn't have ownership. Because the minute you settled as a people and started building walls around things, because this is very good land and I want to farm this land, or I want to have this property, you know, because it's very rich and whatever. And you build a wall around it and you say, claim it and own it. It then becomes something that other people covet and they want it, and so we can fight over that. And also, I want, you know, for this is the masculine, I want to know that it's my child that's going to inherit, or my children that are going to inherit. Therefore, I have to put my wife in a chastity belt. You know, I mean, this is insanity, isn't it? But anyway, so I therefore have, so the woman becomes, you know, the woman who is the source of life, you know, is producing this miraculous process of bringing to birth a small human, is suddenly becomes a chattel, suddenly becomes something that has to be controlled, and you have the whole notion of ownership and property and so on, and it's horrible. It's, well, you know, speaking as a woman, it's immensely offensive, but nevertheless you can see how that grows and grows and turns into all the acquisitiveness and all the whole business of the sort of society that we've created, a sort of monster. And it's very it's very much the material society that is a capitalistic society, that is about profit, that is about ownership. And I mean, it's gone bonkers now. It seems to me that you seem have very few people at the top of the tree, as it were, and everybody else working for them, and in a sort of mad system. But it doesn't take a lot to feel that we could pull back from that, and I think we're going to be. I hope we choose it. I hope we're not forced to. But I don't know how that's going to pan out. But I hope we can choose with heart to create a society where we can go back to not necessarily hunter-gatherer, but although it may be a lot more like that actually, when things start to collapse, but where there is this kind of there's a status in ownership, isn't there? There's a sort of this, so it's automatic separation. It's automatic. It automatically becomes them and us, or and I mean, these are such tricky areas, because compared to so many, I torture myself sometimes with kind of how privileged I am, and it's very easy for me to have these, in some ways it's a sort of philosophical conversation that we're having, but it's also an ethical conversation, and but it's also about our own shadows. So if I'm tested, or I test myself around, the nature of privilege and how lucky I am to have I live in a beautiful old house, and lovely old garden around it and everything. Well, wilderness really, but wild space, and that I love. And how privileged that is. And so it's very easy, in one way to go, oh, easy for me to say, I'm not coping with, trying to live in a tent in unbelievable, appalling conditions, where I don't have clean water, and I don't have this, and I don't have that. But the trouble is, beating myself up about it doesn't help. And that's the thing. So this is where we have to be discerning, and sort of really look at the shadow and work with our shadows. And of course, the shadow is unconscious until you start to make it conscious. But by me becoming too miserable, or too kind of I suppose too lost in that place of horror about inequalities and so on, how does it help those individuals, or those reflections of my conscience, or my anxiety, or and in a way your hubris, because you're thinking about it in that way. So it's a whole layering of of ethical, moral, whatever stuff, and how you judge yourself, and everything. And there's ego in that. There's ego everywhere. I don't think it's possible, Kate, I'm sorry, to completely separate out ego. I think we have moments. I do think we have moments, but I don't think that our lives can be completely separated out from ego. I think the very terror is unconscious ego. I think that is probably the thing that causes the most problems, because when we're unaware of our behaviors, and I'm as guilty as anybody of that, because sometimes when you're very close up to something, you don't realize that you're, that the way that you're reacting or behaving sometimes. And if we have very good friends, they tell us, which is, brilliant. Or if we have very difficult people in our lives, they also tell us, and they're probably our greatest teachers, the ones we find really, really difficult. The ones that that you really, really are challenged by. But yeah, so it's a tricky one, but it is to do with our own shadows, I think. And so it comes back to that. I think the minute we go out there trying to fix things, I think we're probably in trouble, because it's a projection outwards of something that we're not really comfortable dealing with ourselves. But mostly it's uncomfortable. It's pretty difficult. But yeah, I can't remember where we were now.
It reminds me of this. I had this aha moment, and it was like an itch I couldn't scratch. Right? It's like, what is it? What is it? And then I came to the conclusion that I was observing different behaviors and interactions and all, and I came to the conclusion that being so selfless is actually the most selfish and more selfish than being selfish. And it kind of reminds me. It reminded me what you were saying. It's kind of like, on one hand, okay, I'm going there to fix it. Is it actually? For me, the answer really is, what is my role in it? It's kind of like,
yeah, and I mean, what do you mean by being? What does it mean to be selfless?
Exactly, right? What's the motivation?
What does that actually mean? If it means that I'm going to be a martyr, I mean, there used to be a kind of the terrible role of the martyred mother, in you see it still, sadly, but who makes everybody incredibly uncomfortable by putting themselves last, by feeding everybody else and not feeding herself, by all of that, and sighing a lot, lots of sighing, and I'm sorry, but she may think she's being selfless, but actually she's making everybody absolutely miserable, uncomfortable, and feel guilty about breathing. It's a whole interesting area, isn't it? So what do we mean by selfless? I think it's the which is a difficult state to hold. I think the non-egoic state is that sort of amazing bliss that you experience where you have lost the awareness of yourself altogether, in the sense that there's no separation. And it's quite rare, I think. I think you get it in meditation sometimes, and you get it in peak experiences, and it's really about settling into a state of being. I think we can hand over. Maybe that helps. You're angel girls, aren't you? You love you women are angel women. You know about this. I'm sure that the angels help us, and I'm sure that surrendering to well, certainly surrendering to our own higher selves, but surrendering to the divine within us, which we do have to acknowledge that. With that, that is our essence. But really surrendering to the more than helps. I think helps a lot. It's that combination, isn't it? It's self-responsibility of and changing what you can, or at least, I think that's really important. And you were talking about, there's a definitely a lot of just let's all come from love and light. And of course we want to come from love and light. Of course we do. And it seems to me that that's utterly who we are at essence. I mean, we are love. We are light. We are made of light. We are, we are just light molecules, having this extraordinary experience. But and we are love. But I don't think we can kind of bypass the shadow stuff and the what's going on in the world by going, oh, I'm just sending it lots of love and light. I mean,
you're talking about the real love and light. I would like you, Jacquie, the definition of because I feel like the term love and light was taken away by the walk or whatever to just cover, just to avoid, just to not see. And was, that the real meaning of love and light? What's the definition, Jacquie? How do you see that?
Well, I don't know.
I love it. How do you feel? How do you feel? How would you describe it? What is?
Okay. Well, it certainly is much tougher than it seems to me. That it's much tougher than this kind of. It's not fluffy, really. So. Actually, it's pretty uncomfortable. I think really integrity and authenticity and truth and real kindness and real care are tough. I think it's really tough. I don't think it's all sweetness and light, as you might say. I mean, it is light, of course it is, but light is harsh. Light is, light doesn't allow any, no hidden corners there, and light, the greater the light, it throws the greatest shadow. I mean, I know that's a sort of bit of a cliche, but it's a truth as well, obviously. I mean, literally. But it does. So, I've noticed this in my life in various, organizations that I might have been involved with and bits and pieces, that those who aspire to the greatest sort of spiritual aspirations and things, which is, very, very worthy and fine. But it's kind of, I'm trying to say, wow, it's like, you're going where angels fear to tread almost, because if you set that standard of this, this high aspiration, this is like, we are a spiritual organization and we are going to work for the light and we're going to, which is great. But what it does is it brings up everything. If you're going to do that, then that means you have to really deal with all this stuff. And I think that's what's happening in the world at the moment. I hope that I'm right, and I have to trust, because I don't think I could bear it if I
Would you say there is an increase of that uncomfortableness, Jacquie, amongst people? Like, because I feel like, it's like almost out of nowhere things are happening, and the quick shifts, and it's like it's so rapid now. Would you say there is an increase of that need of facing the uncomfortable now?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's essential, because I think we're living in a world where you've got well, the kind of spiritual word is that, if you like, if there's a, I'm sure this is all very simplistic, but if there's a battle in heaven, as it were, going on at the moment, that the light has won already, and that we're dealing with all the mess that has to be sorted out and cleared up. But my goodness, it's extreme, and we can't turn away. That was one of your things you brought up, I think, Kate, about how do we balance out an awareness of what's going on in the world and being aware of whether we can trust it or not. It's a whole other ball game, but with the media and so on, being aware of what's, as much as we can be, truthfully, of what's happening in the world, and also protecting the energy of as much purity as possible, of truth and light coming through. And it's a both and, isn't it? I don't think we can separate those two things out any more than you can separate out light and dark in the end. Because the shadow is part of the light. And you have this thing that the greater the aspiration for the light is, and the three of us are sitting here, and I know that all three of us have great aspirations for serving the light, and being of service and so on. But that's inviting us to deal with the shadow. It can't not be. It's part of it. And so the more we step up, and the more I'm getting a bit serious now, but the more we step up and say, I want to serve, and I want to serve the light, and I want to be useful, apart from the fact I had a hangover, I presumably came in thinking that I might try and be useful into this life. So, I'm sorry, I always do that because I get too serious otherwise. But in stepping up, we are inviting, we have to, because that's our responsibility, is that we have to deal with our shadow.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're playing a game. Otherwise, we're being sweetness and light. We're saying, in one way, it is a game for children. In one way, I want it to be. Talking beforehand about our magical inner child, and how beautiful that energy is, and how pure, and how that innocence and essence of who we are is so important to inform our playfulness and our the lightness of our being, and that's incredibly important. But we are going to have to still, and maybe that's what we do, is we try and take that light, beautiful, courageous, feisty, playful energy, that that directness of a child who hasn't been reprimanded for being too loud or too boisterous or too silly or whatever, and we take that into the darkest places. Because that is pure light. That child, that magical child, is light, is pure, and if we can take that quality with us into those really dark places, and then transformation can happen immediately. And then what you were saying, Kate, about what do we feel about karma? I don't know. But maybe that's how we change it. That's how it's eliminated. Having the courage to, and laugh in the face of horror. That's a big one. But laugh in the face of, anyway, what we might see as wickedness or deliberate cruelty. Because it seems to me, this is a very, very judgmental term, but it seems to me that the one thing that forces of darkness or evil, or whatever way you'd like to look at it, and I know it's only a separation, but they really, really, really hate to be laughed at, because they take themselves terribly seriously, really, really seriously. And so one of the things that we could do is be quite larky, which would drive them crazy. Because you're supposed to be very, very scared and very, very frightened, and you're supposed to behave yourself and do what you're told, and you're supposed to think I'm hugely important. And of course, that's just an incredibly inflated ego in the greatest shadow.
Yeah.
But you know, it's easily said, not so easily done. So
And
that's, you know, I don't know. I'm going on a bit.
I was just loving that, Jackie, because one of Kate and my biggest um, loves, as is evidence in the title of our podcast, the Angels, Magic and Joy podcast, that quality of pure, unadulterated joy is so incredibly powerful, isn't it?
Isn't it?
And it comes up, as you say, as a process, as the end process almost of having done all the shadow work and brought those shadows into the awareness. And as you say, only we can do that. I can't do your shadow work. I can't do Kate's. I can't do, you know, but we can do our own. And how powerful we are. Imagine if everybody in this world did really face their shadows. It would change overnight, wouldn't it? You know, you've said this all along, and it's so true. I just love.
I mean, it really would make all the difference, because you're right. Joy is so powerful. Play is so powerful. You know, it's. I'm sure it's. You know, I'm sure we were ever intended. You know, to just be so grateful for this beautiful planet, this absolute exquisite place, which is heaven on earth. You know, it's utterly beautiful, and yet we've, God, you know, but the rate of desecration and destruction and everything, and and somehow that's why we have to do the work, so that we can rise above it and re-experience the pure bliss of it, really, the pure beauty and harmony, and I mean, it's utterly wonderful. But you're quite right. We can't do much as I've spent most of my life trying to do other people's shadow work for them and bits and pieces, and it's a complete waste of time and utterly silly. But you know, we do all. It's much easier, of course, to concentrate on other people's issues than it is on, you know. They always say that people who become therapists, and I'm a psychotherapist as well, are doing the work that they need to do on themselves. So you know, it's that I say that with with some shame, but it's true. That you know, we can work on. You know, it's much easier to see the issues that other people have. But actually, the only thing we can do is to do the work ourselves. Yeah. It's the only thing.
So true. I totally agree with you.
And do it joyfully, do it willingly. You know. Usually, I mean, in my case, because I'm a really slow study, usually I have to be dragged kicking and screaming into various learning experiences, or at least the universe hits me with something because I've failed yet again to choose to learn something, you know, by choice. So then it'll give me usually a rather unpleasant and uncomfortable life experience that forces me to learn that lesson. And I'm now working rather late in life on trying to preempt that, so that I don't have to have near-death experiences and things in order to wake up, because it's exhausting. But yeah.
I feel like joy is such a lovely way to conclude the whole thing. Is there anything else, Jackie, a word to the world? What should we focus on? You've mentioned joy, and I feel like it's lovely to conclude, you know. It's like, you know, what should we focus on, especially this year? What's important? What should we focus on
this year?
What's important?
Year.
Like
this year,
give me three top, Jackie. No pressure, Jackie.
No pressure. I don't know. I think we need to surrender to love. I think we need to we have to stop. The ego always thinks it knows everything, you know, always thinks it knows the answers to things. It always thinks it's, you know, that's real ego stuff. I think it's unity. I think it's no separation. I think it's test everything on our hearts. I think it's rigorously actually testing everything on our hearts and also playing at the same time. I think it's lightening up and taking responsibility and being love.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Be in love with love. Be in love with life. Over and over and over and over again. However difficult it is, just keep loving life, keep believing in life, keep affirming life, keep manifesting life, be beautiful, recognize you're beautiful, recognize that you are light, that you are an absolute joy, and you're unique. You're that little unique, beautiful, radiant particle of your own life experience and everything, which is your gift to the universe. It's your gift to God, because you've taken that path, and it's our offering. It's all that we can offer, all that I am, over and over again. However difficult, just keep on giving everything, all of it. No holding back.
As you gifted us tonight, Jacquie.
That's beautiful.
It's such a feast. It's such a feast to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're
Very
both
well
so lovely. Thank you so much. I'm honoured to talk to you both. Thank you.
Oh,
thank you
so
so much.
And
And if anyone is listening to us and they don't know about Jacquie, go to Jackie's Facebook, go to Jackie's Instagram, and just feed yourself. Because Jackie's the ultimate.
Give yourself a treat.
I don't want to hear anybody saying they don't know your work. Okay, I'll be checking that. Homework for anyone. Okay.
Thank you, darling.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jacquie, and thank you, Kirsten. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Oh, I love you both. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. Lots of love.
Keep being joy and love. Until next time, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye, my loves.
Bye.
Thank you so much.